Call our meeting to order tonight. Kelly, if you could do the roll call, please.
English,
Here.
Evans,
Here.
Wood,
Here.
McEvers,
Here.
Gookin,
Yeah.
Miller,
Here.
Rise for the invocation. We have Pastor Wayne Foyle from the Hayden Bible Fellowship with us tonight. Welcome.
Yes, thank you for your service to the community. Let's bow our heads in prayer. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your grace. We understand that you are the creator of the world. You are the one who sustains it by the power of your hand. We confess our dependence upon you as your creatures, and thank you for the many ways that you have blessed our community, that you've blessed our own state and even our country, not to mention the world, with so many blessings. And so we give you thanks for these things and pray tonight that you would give wisdom to the council, that you would establish peace and righteousness here in our own community. We thank you, Father, for the many things that you give to us, and ask that you would bless us in the name of Jesus. We pray. Amen.
Amen. Amy, if you could lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we did have one adjustment to our agenda tonight. Item 3 under other business, which is referring to a potential parking plan at the Riverstone Transit Center. That issue has been resolved and therefore removed from the agenda. And Dan, you had worked a little bit on that.
Yes, was liaison to KMPO, which is the oversight of transportation in Kootenai County. And I was also part of the committee when the Riverstone Transit Center, the RTC, was originally proposed. One of the questions asked was whether there would be bus storage at the RTC, and the answer was no, they weren't going to be storing the buses there. Fast forward to earlier last month and before, and all of a sudden bus storage was going to be at the RTC, which really surprised everyone. And so the KMPO had a public comment period, and the city, which we don't want bus storage at the RTC, decided that we would add a public comment, which of course has to come to us for a decision. And that was the item 3 tonight, which is just a letter saying that the city would prefer not to have bus storage there. And I spoke, and the mayor worked with the commissioners and with the Transportation Authority, and so did I, and was assured by County Commissioner Filios that there is going to be no bus storage at the RTC, so we don't need to add that comment tonight, and we're going to hold Chris to his word, and if not, Chris, you're not going to be king of the Winter Carnival. Nope.
And they are working on a different site for the bus.
Yes, they may have a site, and I appreciate everyone who's worked and contributed toward that. We are big supporters of public transportation here. That has not changed.
All right, thank you. Now is the public comment portion. If anyone wishes to comment that's not named Russ, you can come up. But I guess Russ will let you come up here too.
Just a couple of things. I got like 6 hours, so that's good. I had a unique opportunity at Chris Filios' house, you just brought him up, where he was trying to reel in a really nice business to our area from Portland, Oregon. And one of the biggest hiccups was our college graduation rates not being, what they should be. So they're figuring we don't have the talent. And I follow a group, I think they're called Kootenai County Young Professionals, and they showcase people weekly or however they do it on Facebook. And I think we do have the talent. And my idea was, if Chris would have had this to use, an index of job descriptions and people we have in town, to where he could just hit a couple buttons and send names that they could interview to showcase that we do have the talent. It was a kind of a cool business. And Chris really worked hard, and we might get it, and I think that's something that needs to, with the Jobs Plus, if we couldn't categorize the talent that we have available to make it accessible and easy to transmit, be a good thing to do. And the other thing I really wanted to address, Christy Woods, if that's all right.
Hi, Russ.
This cartoon and your human rights and all that stuff, it blows my mind that people's brain go right to homosexuality with that. You know, there's a lady at Coeur d'Alene Honda, people won't do business because she's either Mexican or Muslim, but she's really from the Blackwell tribe down in Lewiston. And that kind of fits into your human rights too. And maybe you guys can expand on that, because when she told me that, it just kind of ripped my guts right out, you know. And but anyway, if you guys could get the word that, you know, you're more than just what they want to think, you know, that you're actually helping lots of people have a life here, I think it would be a good thing. But that's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, Russ.
Anyone else wishing to come up for public comment tonight? Okay.
I just had a comment back to that the idea of, you know, tracking on the, you know, good people and good potential hires sounds good, although if I was an employer of one of those existing people, I might not be wild to have them on a list to get recruited somewhere else, but...
All right, we'll move on. Consent calendar. Wood, do you have that tonight?
What? I'm a little behind here, Mayor.
So do we have someone to approve the consent calendar? Maybe Dan.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's all.
missing a page here. So I would make a motion to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Motion to approve the
Second.
consent calendar, second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Are we backwards here? I'm a little, do you have it, I go to a different page here.
So our agenda appears to be missing a page.
So,
Oh, I see. This is page 2, but that's,
Do you think that, okay. Okay. So we will move on, we'll go on to resolution number 20-007. This is the approval and acceptance of utility easement with Riviera Walk Homeowners Association. Who is here to present that tonight? Terry's here.
I think that was part of the consent calendar.
That was?
Well, let's do it separately.
Okay. Are you here to do that separately, Terry, or are you on?
That one was originally on consent calendar just for approval. That's just a pretty much
Okay,
a straight
okay.
matter of record.
So then let's do this. Let's move to approve resolution 20-007.
Second.
All those in favor to approve 20-007?
I think that needs to be a roll call, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure, though. I don't know.
It's on.
It does need to be a roll call.
Is it
It's a roll
consent?
call. Yeah.
Okay. So, Kelly, we will do the.
See what happens when Renata is gone?
We will do the roll
Oh,
call.
let us see us on a good day.
Evans,
yes.
Wood,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin.
Yes.
Motion carried. Now, Terry, so you are here for the resolution number 20-008. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. Before, if you want to just wait there a minute, I'll ask if any member of the council has an announcement. Maybe someone's going to announce to get me straightened out on the agenda here. Any member of the council have an announcement? Amy?
I have an announcement from the Arts Commission, just to let council and mayor know that the commission is currently reviewing, updating, and amending the art ordinance, and you can expect to see it before you soon. And then one more item, I wanted to wish a happy birthday to our city attorney, Mike Gridley, tonight.
Happy birthday,
You
Mike.
made it, Mike.
Yeah. All right, any other member? Kiki?
Just another reminder that there is a trustee position on the library board that is still open, and if anyone knows anyone who's interested, you can contact Amy Ferguson at the city, and she'll put you in contact with a job description and an application.
Okay. Those library board, they don't come open very often, do they?
No, and I'm hoping we get a new pool of new apps to choose from, so.
All right, any other member of the council have an announcement? Okay, Terry, resolution number 20-008, approval and acceptance of utility easement and approval of an easement and service agreement with Aspen Homes and Development LLC. That's you?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me to come before you tonight. Kyle Marine was supposed to have been here. His wife and her profession is off and on call, and luck would have it, she got called tonight, so he's home with the kids, probably watching us on TV. So I think he probably arranged that, but you never know.
Make sure you wave to him, Terry.
So we've been kind of looking at the issues with the Blackwell Booster Station. We inherited this station from Washington Water Power and Hayden Pines Water District some years ago. I think it was 1992. We've kept it going for this many years. It was undersized when it was originally constructed and has presented a lot of problems, and we've been looking to upgrade it. In conjunction with that, we have a water line that goes straight up the hill from the booster station. This is the interior of the station itself. But as you can see here, the booster station sits on Canal Street and serves a water line straight up the hill right through some backyards. And we only have a partial easement for that water line. We've had a leak on that line 5 years ago, right in the middle of the roadway, as luck would have it, where we could get to it. Otherwise, we'd have been going down over a hill and handing it because you can't get to it with equipment. So we've been struggling with what we were going to do to update this station and replace that hillside water line with something that's more easily accessed and maintainable. So we had looked at rerouting that line up Fairmont Loop Road, up the hill, coming down around the Bush Station and going up the hill and tying in at another point on Fairmont Loop. And the estimate on that was about $900,000 because we would have to rebuild half of that roadway. Plus, we would be impacting the residents on that loop for traffic because it would take a month to do that, and so they would only have a one-lane road to travel. So we've been looking for alternate solutions. As luck would have it, Aspen Homes was looking at property in that neighborhood to develop. So they have purchased the old Dodge property there between Lakeview Heights, or Lakeview Heights and Fairmont Loop. And they wanted to develop some lots in there. So we got the idea of maybe seeing if we could get an easement up through that property and a new lot for a new booster station to replace that one that's failing and worn out. So they've been very gracious to work with us. We talked about what we could do to accommodate them in their development as well as help us in our necessary development to take care of those citizens up there. At this point, that booster station does not provide fire flow to the Fairmont Loop. We do have fire hydrants up there, but we can only provide about 500 GPM. So we need to have something that's more reliable with a good quality supply and fire flow. So we have worked with them. They are looking to develop 4 lots there. They're willing to grant us an easement between 2 of the lots right on the property line, and they're willing to trade us a 110 by 110 piece of real estate for 4 cap fees, basically. So about the cost of $24,000 what it cost the water department. I believe I was asked, what that gets for us. That's about 12,100 square feet of real estate for about $2 a square foot. That's really a pretty prudent deal. Plus, it gives us the opportunity to build a proper station there, get a transmission main up the hill, and we are looking at a future tank in that neighborhood. Discovered that there was an existing easement for Hayden Pines on part of the Dodge property further up the hill that gives us a better location to access that property in the future to put a tank up there to help with reliability. So we have been working with them for about the last year to get this all hammered out. So that is the proposal, that they would grant an easement of about 550 feet, lineal feet, the booster station lot, and ownership of that for about $24,000.
Thank you, Terry. Questions? Woody?
I love that $2 a square foot. That's pretty good.
That is good.
I don't see you guys trade very often, so that's even makes it better. I have a question. So this is out of the city limits, correct?
It is.
This is some of the old school water rights things that. So when we, City of Coeur d'Alene Water Department, provides water out of the city, we are responsible for fire suppression also?
If we provide it, yes. The hydrants were part of that system at the time, so we are, in my mind, we're obligated to do that.
Okay.
We have worked out a deal with the local fire departments. We have put an addition onto the booster station where they can push water up the hill with a fire engine, but still they can only get 500 to 600 GPM. Otherwise, they got to truck it up the hill. ACI, the old ACI system up there does have fire hydrants above that on Jacobs Loop, but they're not down on Fairmont Loop. So it would still be some ways to run the line down there. So
Is this area going to grow and you're going to keep adding water up there? Do you see that?
that's a
You
good
talked about
question.
it
That
today.
it should depend on what the county does with road access. You know, there's been rumors of taking Fairmont Loop over the hill and tying it back into over by Post Falls so traffic could go that way instead of having to go around, take some of the load off. That would add some load to Fairmont Loop. What it would do for development up there is a good question because it's a question of whose service area it is.
So I was asking is if they expand the road, does that mean we have to supply water?
Not necessarily.
Thanks.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Terry, this, going on to what Woody said, so we have a policy that says we can't provide water outside the city unless they annex, but yet we have a deal with Aspen Homes, and we're going to be providing them water. So how do we get around that?
Well, that's part of the agreement was that we would not force them to annex that property at this time. They would sign the agreement. Our policy does allow for service outside city limits if they're not contiguous.
Okay.
And there is main frontage on those properties already.
So they're not contiguous with any city property?
I think there's one lot that may be contiguous.
So, I
So,
mean,
yes, we are making an exception to our policy in exchange for the new transmission line easement and the property.
and I'm cool with that, but I'm just thinking down the road when this happens, maybe happens somewhere else. You know, can't someone point to this as a precedent and
Yes,
say,
yep.
hey, you guys did it over there?
Yep. I agree with that, but the need to me was greater than the precedent.
Wasn't it true that a while back you were looking to see if anyone wanted to buy this water system?
A portion of it, yes. We were looking to see if the ACI system would want to buy a portion of the system. With the transfer of ownership in there through some legal proceedings, that fell through.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Terry? If not, we'd be looking for council action.
I would make a motion to approve resolution number 20-008, approval and acceptance of a utility easement for water line and approval of an easement and service agreement with Aspen Homes and Development, LLC.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Kelly?
Wood,
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you, Terry. Move on to item number 2, Atlas Road Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. Chris Bosley.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here tonight before you. I was here last month asking for permission to hire JUB engineers to do a preliminary budget evaluation, as it's called, on the Atlas Road segment from Celtice Way to Hanley Avenue. And they were able to fast track a portion of that project for me and get some numbers to me as quickly as possible so that I could come before you tonight. In about 10 days, I believe it is, the Surface Transportation Block Grant application is due to KMPO, and this seems like a perfect way to spend some of that money. So, the part I'm talking about here, as I showed you before, this is the same graphic, that from Hanley Avenue all the way down to Celtice Way, which is a leftover of an old county road, and our maintenance crews spend a lot of time out there just patching potholes and replacing pavement every year because it's just was never built to take the traffic that it has today, and especially the truck traffic that depends on that road, getting up to the Atlas Industrial Loop and the Hearn Industrial area as well. I got our crews to take some photos just this week, or last week, showing some of the patchwork that's been done out there, and as you can see, it's in need of a complete overhaul out there. And so what I'm requesting is approval to apply for this grant. And with this grant, it would be about 2027 would be the construction year. So a couple years prior to that, we would be obligated to start paying some of our funding in a 7.34% match that's required on federal grant money. And we would start with design, right-of-way acquisition, because there would be a little bit of that, and then moving into construction. So a couple years prior to 2027, we'd be looking at doing all this. So at this point, there's no financial obligation. It's just me submitting this application. If we receive the grant, then we'll just have to work on budgeting that money in a few years from now. But this seems like a very good return on our investment. It's about a $4.5 million project we're looking at right now. So about $337,000 to get that return on our investment seems worth it to me. But that's up to you. So I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Chris? Dan?
Well, I drive that couple of times a day, so this sounds terrific, but then when I hear, but it's not, we got to get it in the next 10 days, but then we're not actually going to see anything for 7 years. Is there any way to move that up, or with the new improvements for the, access to industrial park and everything?
Well, there is always the opportunity that KMPO and ITD can move dollars around as funding becomes available. Sometimes some projects have to take a back seat, and that allows that money to advance. And so projects are always shifting around, but this is kind of the long-range plan that we're looking at. Yes, unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to fix those types of problems that we have out there right now, but at least we'd have an end in sight, and we certainly don't have $4.5 million to do it ourselves right now.
Well, maybe Mr. Gookin can
Right.
get him going.
Yeah, I nodded when you asked that question, because that happens a lot. And occasionally, they look for what's called a shovel-ready program. And if we apply for the grant, and if we have the plans drawn up, then we're considered shovel-ready. And sometimes when another project falls through, they'll look for something that's better. And actually, that just happened last year with something, I forget what, but it was like, oh, we're moving the money from this project to that project. So, yeah, that's the first thing when I read the staff report. I'm like, oh my God, 2027.
Yeah.
Wow, am I going to be dead? I don't know, but the road will be fixed. If I could, Mr. Mayor, if I could continue, if you have. So we're going to be working on this, so we're not going to overlay this. It's going to be off the overlay schedule, and you're just going to continue to patch, I assume.
We probably wouldn't do an overlay. If we could get some improvement out of a chip seal, that might be more worth it. But to put that much money into an overlay at this point,
Right.
and then to have it ripped out in 4, 5 to 7 years doesn't seem like a good use of our investment on that. But we'll definitely keep after these problems that we have out there.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Christie?
Chris, what 4 to 5 years from now, how much of the $337,000 do we need to come up with?
Usually that would be 20% or less of the money would be towards those types of the design and right-of-way acquisition.
Okay, and then after that, what year would we be on the hook for the rest of it? Not that it isn't a good deal, it just seems like we should be prepared for that.
Right. I would think that around 2026, we would have to, a lot of times we have to give all the money ahead of time. All of what our match would be, we have to give it to ITD ahead of time to prove that we have the money, I believe is their reasoning there, so that we don't stiff them for it, I guess. But by that, we can also work this into impact fees. I mean, we've got money in that quadrant right now, so this is something we have to plan for. But we're giving ourselves plenty of time to plan for that in the event that there aren't enough impact fees in that quadrant for this project.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Woody?
A little nuts and bolts. So when this is all done, what do you picture? Is it a 4-lane highway with a left turn?
It would be 1 lane in each direction with a left turn lane, continuous left turn lane, because that would get left turning traffic out of the way. We have some right-of-way constraints out there. Anyone who's familiar with Atlas, off to the east side of it, when you start to drop down that hill, our ditch that's along there is actually a half a culvert section, and there's just not much room for drainage improvements or any of that in there. We don't even know how much of sidewalk we'll be able to get on the east side, so we're looking for some opportunities to provide safe crossings to the west side, where we've already got the trail built all the way from Celtice Way up to the Prairie Trail now with that project we just completed at the Atlas Industrial Loop.
So basically, it's what it is plus a left turn lane.
Correct, and a stouter section. You know, we'd be looking at a minimum of 4 inches of asphalt, and there's probably an inch or two out there today.
And can we use ditches there rather than grassy swales?
Possibly.
The maintenance.
JUB did come up with an option already of piping some of the storm water to an area that the city owns just north of the I-90 bridge off to the west side, where the Atlas Trail veers away from the side of the road a little bit. It's a hillside, but it seems like it might be flat enough that we could get some stormwater swales in there, and then we would have a common swale like we do for Government Way, which has been very beneficial to the city in having one location for a swale instead of having it all along our street sides like that.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Chris? If not, we'd be looking for council action.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move to authorize staff to proceed with applying for an Atlas Road Surface Transportation Block Grant Program.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll move on to our public hearing. This is a legislative hearing, and this is public comments for the CDBG Annual Action Plan for fiscal year 2020. Hillary is here today.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. It's a pleasure to be before you with this 2020 Annual Action Plan for our Community Development Block Grant Funds. So an overview, so kind of what we're here for tonight is to present the Annual Action Plan to you, and then also to have the public hearing if there's any citizens that wanted to speak on this that haven't already, and then for you to kind of direct me to be able to submit this on to HUD so that we can take the next steps. So this is kind of the outline of that. So a little bit of brief history. So the city has the Community Development Block Grant Fund. So we receive these funds from HUD. So that's the Housing and Urban Development Agency. And it's really to support low to moderate income residents in our community through specific allowable activities. We first started receiving these funds back in 2007. And so we've been able to be very diligent with how we use the funds, and we've been able to use them in a variety of different ways to assist people with repairing their homes, to help with some job creation. We've done some sidewalk repairs and helping with different community organizations to do different projects. And so I'll be talking to you about kind of the plan for what does 2020 funds look like. So what is LMI? So that's a term that's used frequently, so low to moderate income, and that's a HUD designation of households whose total earnings are based on 30%, 50%, and 80% of the yearly annual median income. And then we look at HUD's median income level, and you can see that on the screen. So for Kootenai County, that's $64,000 for a family of 4. And I know you did receive the basically CDBG presentation that also has some of the more specific things for kind of our area and looking at what are the different breakdown of the funds. But just for the public to know, so the low income right now for a family of 4 is $51,700. For extremely low income, it's $25,750 for that same family of four, and then the very low is $32,300. So for us to be able to use our CDBG funds, we have to make sure that they meet all of the HUD requirements, and so they have to be eligible. And so the list is kind of on here for what are the things that are required to meet the national objectives. And so, of course, it has to benefit the low to moderate income individuals. Another way it can be used is to benefit and to remediate slum and blight, and then to meet an urgent need. So that's another thing that can be used. We don't often do that, but if there was an area of the community where we had to, use some CDBG funds, we could do that if there was an urgent need. And then, of course, it has to be approved by HUD. So the other thing is that the activities have to be outlined in the annual action plan. So we do this every year in advance of knowing how much money we're going to be receiving from HUD. But once we have kind of all that figured out, we get input from the community, we prepare this plan, submit it to HUD, and then that's kind of our guidelines for the rest of the year for how do we spend our money. Kind of puts it into different pockets of money that all meet those national objectives. And then it also has to meet, we have a 5-year consolidated plan, and so it also has to align with those goals, and I'll speak to you about that. So those are all the things staff has to look at. And then when we go through the process, so McEvers is serving on our community review committee, which has been, our grant review committee, and we've appreciated having participation from him as well as community members to help figure out how do we allocate the funds. And so we recently had a meeting to look at the 2019 funds, be coming forward at a separate time to you to make the recommendation and to be able to allocate those. But when we make those decisions, we have to figure out how much staff time is it going to take, because it can be very time consuming. And so we need to make sure that we fund projects that are, like you said, Councilman Gookin, shovel ready, that they have a good plan, they know how to use the funds, and that it's eligible. So this is just a list. I won't read through all of these, but these are just some of the examples of eligible activities that we can spend the funds on. And then these are the 6 goals that are in that 5-year consolidated plan. So our plan right now covers 2018 to 2022. So those are the plan years. And so we're looking at increasing supply of for sale housing, for rent housing, looking at sidewalks, neighborhood revitalization. Job creation is another one that's a big one through HUD. It's a little more challenging, but that's always an opportunity. And then public service programs. So for our 2020 annual action plan, we're required to do public engagement, and so we do that through a variety of different ways. So we did have a forum in December, on December 4th, and we had about 15 people attend and provided great input into the plan. We also did a survey and had 45 individuals respond to that. And then we're required to have kind of this 30-day public comment period that ends with tonight's hearing, so that there's additional opportunities throughout. And of course, we advertise that through a variety of different ways and did direct outreach to our 185 community stakeholders. So the results in your plan are really based on the input we received. The only comment letter we did receive was from Kootenai County, and it was really more just asking us to clarify language about mobility and public transit in our community. And so it's noted in this PowerPoint presentation in the staff report that it was page 54 of the document. The attached action plan in your packet, it's actually page 51. So if you were trying to compare that, I made some additional edits to the document, and that's the version in your packet. And the one online has not been updated to reflect that because we wanted council to give guidance this evening. So what we heard from our community members through the survey as well as the in-person forum was they really confirmed the needs. So on the left side is confirming the needs for how we've already been spending the money. And so a lot of the things came up, of course, making sure people can stay in affordable housing. And then also there's so many community groups that provide great services. So those were important. And then we also heard some other things. So this year, the affordable quality childcare and early childhood education, we've heard that before, but that's even more of a pressing issue these days. And I know United Way and the Alice Task Force are addressing that. But some things on the right we heard, we're also looking at maybe business incubator support, so more of kind of the job creation and emergency shelters. Mental health has become a huge issue, and so those were some of the things that we heard from our community members. So this is what we are recommending for how we would allocate the funds. So we are looking at this $329,815. That is based on our last year's funding. And so that's how we do it each year, is we kind of look at what was allocated and assume that it's going to be right in that range. And so if it's 20% more or less, we'll come back to you with an amendment for your approval. But if it's under 20%, we can shift things around a little bit as long as it kind of meets the guidelines of all of the plans I mentioned. So as you can see here, so on the left side are the funding allocations we're recommending, and then on the right side are the projects. The only thing that really changes this year is the group recommended that we take some of the funding from the sidewalk repairs because we haven't been able to use those as quickly as we would like to. And so we still have a nice pot of money, and we're going to be working with the Streets and Engineering Department to do a project in the spring. But they thought, instead of putting a lot of money into that, let's keep doing the emergency minor home repair programs and then put some of the additional funds into the community opportunity grants. And so you can see this one here, so the $5,000 is what they're recommending for sidewalk repairs and accessibility, and then the community opportunity grants, $203,852. So that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to stand for questions, and then, of course, if there's any members of the public, we would hold the public hearing, and then lastly, I'd be asking for your approval of submitting this to HUD so that we can begin that process.
Questions for Hillary? Christie?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Hillary, is there ever any carryover, or do you close out the grant
So
every year?
it depends. So we cannot carry over administrative funds. So that's something where that has to be used each year. And administrative funds covers staffing as well as the benefits for the individual, the community development specialists we're trying to rehire for. And then it also covers things like doing plans. So if we have to hire a consultant to help us evaluate housing, fair housing, things like that that are required by HUD, it can be used for that as well as travel and training. The other funds can roll over. And so we have emergency minor home repair, we have the sidewalk funds, those all can kind of roll over, community opportunity grants, but there's a timeliness test, so we can't have more money in the pot than HUD allows us to have. And so that's why when we're looking at grants and even the emergency minor home repair, we want to make sure we can spend it down so that we're not in violation of HUD's.
So that was my next question. You do make every effort to spend it,
We
right?
do, absolutely, yes.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan, and then Dan.
Okay, what I'm wondering is, excuse me, if you have any particular projects in mind for dealing with the affordable housing kind of an issue, because, I mean, on one hand, that's such a, giant scope and the need, and like this would barely, kind of make a dent, but I guess, do you have anything concrete that you're aware in that area that's going to happen, or?
No, but that is an area, so through this community opportunity grants, that's where we could have somebody that is going to be doing a project could come to us and apply to be able to use funds in that kind of category. That is something that, yes, does keep coming up, but because we don't have a lot of money in the CDBG, we have to kind of balance that out. But certainly that's something that is a priority in the consolidated plan and in each of the annual action plans.
Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And maybe Woody can answer this too. So Lake City Center, 5,000, does that cover the Meals on Wheels?
It covers a portion of it. It's been kind of an ongoing thing to support the seniors who can't get out to eat.
And did we increase that funding last time around?
No.
No.
Not the Meals on Wheels part. It's been pretty consistent. We did some major repairs to the building. It was under that other part, the
Goes through the grant.
when a community opportunity grants did some roof repair, some siding repair. Building hasn't been maintained real well.
Okay, so as our liaison to the senior center, how is the funding? Is that, you guys doing okay?
It helps a lot. Yeah, it's an interesting world, you guys. It's an interesting world. I was going to comment on the housing. Mm-hmm. It seems to me, if I'm not mistaken, one of the apartment complexes out in Riverstone came and they said, we will set aside this many apartments for low income, and the money they got helped pay for some of their permitting or something. Does that ring a bell?
I am
Might
not
have been
positive on the details.
before you-
Troy might actually remember how that
So they
was
kind of give,
structured.
they don't have a lot to give, so they give it when they can for what helps. They qualify for something and you pay the permitting or something like that, so. somebody.
There are options to do housing vouchers, so that's one way to do it. I know more recently, we've had ones where they're using it for providing services, so kind of counseling and educational training on, how to do financial management for people that are in the LMI category, that might be seniors that are LMI and some of the housing.
A lot of the money ends up going to particular groups for projects like we've done St. Vinny's for quite a few years. I remember they needed a floor. Their floor was blowing up and where they had low-income housing and people like that. And those are the bigger funds go for those major projects. And remember, that's all HUD money, so they have to jump through a lot of hoops. They have to pay the certain wage. You have to do a lot of paperwork to support it to make sure it's done right and the money is spent well. It's quite a process once you get the grant to actually get the project done. So
Another way is also, so if somebody came in and wanted to do an affordable housing project, they could also ask to use some of the funds for public infrastructure. So if infrastructure had to be extended to the property, that's another way that does help the projects and is easier for us to track that as well through the CDBG.
Habitat
Yes.
did that in the past with
Right.
a little pocket development or
Mr. Mayor.
Christie?
Back to what Dan was saying about Meals on Wheels, it seems like that's, and Woody, you can speak to this, but it seems like that program's really always somewhat in jeopardy. So if it's $5,000 that you give every year, wouldn't we look at keeping up with the cost of inflation and maybe trying to add on to that a little bit?
well, we're up to about 30,000 meals, and right now we're doing about 100 meals a day. It's pretty wild. The cost, there's some money coming from area aging, and that's state money. I think, Dan, you were on that board, and they mostly fund that, and then this helps compensate for it. Most of it is volunteers, and it covers a lot of the expenses, partial expenses at the senior center. Helps pay the electricity and the utilities, some maintenance costs, because it's used every day, putting out those meals. So it's another world, and you're
I think what we're both asking, is that enough?
Yeah.
well, it's enough for right now. I think,
Okay. Fair enough.
I think we look at it from, can you spread it around? Like, I like the leftovers going to home repair, the MRAPs are like the old lady down the street whose roof is falling off, you can go to her and get a new roof. And there's people that kind of support that. I like it when it touches an individual, keeps them in their home, fixes something that's important to them. I mean, the big projects are big projects, but those ones that touch Grandma Jones and stuff like that, I think are the key ones. And then the Meals on Wheels will have you come out and help scoop sometime and see it. It's pretty interesting how it's done, and those people don't see a lot of people. It's their only contact sometimes. It's its own world, very interesting.
So Hillary, it says estimated grant total, and you explained how you come up with that amount, because you haven't actually been awarded that amount.
That's correct.
Correct. So
Right.
if that is greater than that, there's an opportunity to increase some of those
Yes,
amounts? So
we could certainly do that.
When that actual amount comes in, and let's say it's 10,000 more than that, will you come back to amend the plan, or do you have the flexibility to put that in a category?
If it's 20% more than what we're anticipating here, and if it changes it, then we would come back to you for that decision. If it's a small amount, and it looks like we could kind of still do that 1.5%, of the budget, and then that increases the Meals on Wheels, then we can just kind of allocate it that way. That's my understanding. I can
So what we
look into
could
that
do
further.
is, if that grant dollar amount comes in greater than the 329, we can be in contact with the Lake City Center, and that may be an opportunity, to increase that from 5 in correspondence with that grant going up. So that could be an opportunity to help
Every
out
li-
with that program a little more.
Every little bit helps,
Yeah.
Or were you saying that it would automatically increase to the 1.5%
I am not
share?
positive how we've done in the past, but I'm thinking that's the easiest way to do it, is just kind of use those percentages and allocate it across the board. Now, if it was council's preference to increase more money to the Lake City Center, we could certainly, you could tell me that tonight, and that's fine, and then we'll kind of know that that's your guidance, so that when we submit the plan, once we know what our allocation is, we can certainly increase that line item.
Can you just come back if the allocation increases over a certain amount?
Sure.
feel us out again.
Okay.
Thanks.
So otherwise, it's like Kiki said, that it would, each one of those line items would increase by the percent that the
Right.
grant increased. Okay. I guess what, just being in conversation with the Lake City Senior Center on that program, that if we can do a little bit more there, that we should take a look at that.
Or I think it's important to at least give you some direction from council that we don't want to see that amount go down for Lake City Senior Center. But if there's a potential for it to be increased by either the windfall of 1.5% or come back for a flat ask of an increase, then both of those would be acceptable.
Okay.
Can you
great.
tell us briefly what the dates are? We submit this budget and then HUD reviews it. Then when will you know these dates that you'll be?
You know, it kind of depends each year. I don't know in the last couple years, I mean, summer is kind of, I mean, we don't really know.
Springish?
Yeah.
It depends on the federal government's approval of a budget.
And how often does
Yeah.
that happen?
So, but the steps are, once that's approved, then you may come back to us, and then there's a finite timeline where individuals under the community opportunity grants can submit
Yes.
those, and then they're reviewed and then awarded within a predetermined timeframe.
So there's an interesting lag with the CDBG funds just because they're on a plan year, program year versus our fiscal year, and then because of the federal government and their budgets. So it tends to be that we would kind of find out maybe summertime what our actual allocation is, even though the plan year starts in April. So we're actually kind of advancing the funds for things that are already in the hopper, but we delay it, we kind of lag it. So we just kind of came up with our recommendations for 2019 Community Opportunity Grant, so we'll be coming to you for that. So there's this kind of weird lag. So anyway, I don't know if there's a better way to explain that, but
Okay.
yes, so I'll keep you updated when I hear anything more. We'll definitely let council know what our allocation is, and then once this plan is approved, but I would say it's probably spring, summer is when we would find out the allocation, then we
assume-
would kind of know the dollar amounts more
And we'll
specifically.
assume the new person will be in place prior to that.
Yes.
Good.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. So
Yes.
you were interviewing, I guess, or you were looking over
We
applications recently?
have received applications, so we're going to move forward on the process of doing interviews.
You
and-
did a swell job tonight.
Well, thank you, I appreciate that. We're looking forward to having a new community development specialist. Michelle did a fantastic job, so I wanted to thank her for all of her efforts, and yep, she's done a great job with the program.
Dan?
Well, just to kind of follow up on something else that Woody said to, and Michelle, that she did come into the Area Agency on Aging and at one of our staff meetings, so for like our adult protection and our referral services, and made them aware of the home repair program, which is a very, that's a real practical kind of a thing. So once we have, the person back on board and all of that, that's part of the outreach that they do. So hopefully they'll find places to spend it, so.
Any other questions for Hillary? All right, thank you, Hillary. And we will open up the public comment portion of this hearing. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to comment on tonight's program, they can do so. Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of that and look for council action.
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
I'd make a motion to approve the Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan for Plan Year 2020.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
So, Mr. Mayor, I would like to move to enter into executive session pursuant to Idaho Code 74206, subsection F, to communicate with our legal counsel for the public agency to discuss the legal ramifications of and legal options for pending litigation or controversies not yet litigated but imminently likely to be litigated.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please. Kelly?
Miller,
Yes?
McEvers,
Yes.
Gookin,
Yes.
English,
Yes?
Evans,
Yes.
Wood.
Yes.
All right, we are in executive session. Thank you, everyone.